Welcome to the HMO Property Show, by investors for investors. Brought to you by the HMO Property Co, Australia's leaders in impact investing. Investments made with the intention to generate a measurable, beneficial social or environmental impact alongside a positive financial return. Catch us weekly as we discuss all things cash flow positive property investing.
Welcome back to the HMO Property Show. I'm your host, Neil Gibb, and today we have got Mr. Michael McGowan on the podcast, the HIA Executive Director. Michael, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me, Neil. Really a pleasure to be here.
It's an absolute pleasure to have you here. First and foremost, everybody knows, or they think they know what the HIA is, because everyone that's built a new house wants to sign a HIA build contract. But what is the HIA?
Yeah, it's I guess at its core, it's a group of businesses from the building industry who got together around 75 years ago and said, you know, we're going to be more impactful as one universal voice.
Yep.
And from that, we've grown. We now have offices in every state in Australia. We're a national body that represents the residential home building industry. And I guess from that small group have grown into a really large organisation with over 40,000 members across Australia. Wow. And they're builders, they're trades, they're planners, they're architects, they're manufacturer suppliers, really lots of people from the industry. And then at a certain stage, we started to develop a whole lot of, services for members. So, whether that be the contracts that you spoke of, we're a GTO, so we've got an apprentice service. We're an RTO, so we do training. So if you want to do your diploma to become a builder, yep, you can come and do that through HIA. And then HIA Awards, which are a fantastic recognition of industry work as well. So it is a great night out. Lots of work goes into it, but it's become a supporting partner for a lot of our members and our builders out there, and it ultimately comes back to that universal voice for industry. Yeah.
So a lot of end users of the products that we build and develop like to sign HIA contracts because they think that it kind of protects them. But the HIA is actually for the builder, isn't it? The builder, the trades, the kitchen installers, the tilers, everybody that delivers that end product. The HIA is the governing body for them more than anything, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It's a member-based organisation, so absolutely we are there to support those members and provide a lot of support services around those contracts. Yeah. So, some of our builders and people using those contracts don't have the experience and knowledge around what some of those clauses mean. So we've got a full team of lawyers who are constantly reviewing those contracts and workplace service managers who advise our members on those contracts. They are very fair contracts, so it is a good thing for you if you are building a home to have a HIA contract, because it is universally recognised as being one of the best in practice.
Mm. So a lot of our listeners are probably the end users of the products, or they're investors that are building HMOs or NDIS properties, or some of them would be mum and dads that are building forever homes for their families as well. So who would they go to for advice on a HIA contract when they get one from a builder? Yeah,
so building and energy is probably the best place for them. Yeah. Obviously, you can go to any lawyers and get your own legal advice, but building and energy have a great service that's available to the general public to go and talk through any issues that they have with any of those clauses or any of those things that they are uncertain about. I would always say that go back to your builder in the first instance and have that discussion with them before you're kind of heading off in other directions. Yeah. And then if you've both got questions, then you can both come to HIA and we're happy to provide advice.
Oh, brilliant,
back through the builder on what each of those terms mean and kind of how the contract's likely to play out.
Yeah, I'm guessing been pretty busy over the last couple of years, mate, with the challenges that's been in the industry.
Yeah, absolutely. It's we don't shy away from the fact that it's been a really challenging time. I think we were coming off the back of a 5-year downturn. We went through some challenges within COVID, and there was some real uncertainty in the industry. I think there were certainly some sales coming through, but looking forward into the next 6 months of the pandemic and what we all thought was going to be something that lasted a lot longer than it did in WA, there needed to be some action taken, and that was a lot of the feedback that we received. I don't think anyone expected, not in our wildest dreams, to kind of see what we saw over the course of the next 6 months. And a lot of the modelling never really kind of took some of that into consideration. So as a result of what's happened, not just locally, but nationally and globally, in regards to building, everyone looked to stimulate their economy, whether that was through residential construction, commercial construction, industrial, building roads. There was a lot of stimulus in the entire global economy, and obviously we've been caught up a lot in that.
We have poor old Australia left on its own.
It is a little bit. There's pros and cons to being the most isolated place in the world with your borders closed. So, it's obviously caused some challenges for the builders, but we also recognise there's lots of consumers and lots of your listeners that have probably been caught up in a lot of the challenges that we've faced through that time, through no fault of their own, that, everyone's kind of working their way through at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely. What's the journey that you've been on? How did you end up at the HIA? How did you end up the executive director? Like, have you got a trade background?
No, I joked this morning that I didn't write down when I was leaving school HIA executive director as to kind of what I wanted to be when I grew up. I actually went to uni and was on the verge of being a phys ed teacher, and a few people around me, including my dad, who'd been a teacher for a long time, kind of went, well, I think there might be something more here, so why don't you keep exploring? So I probably faffed around like most of us do in our early 20s and ended up in HR and recruitment with Bankwest and Rio Tinto for about 10 years.
Yep.
And that was awesome. There was, the height of iron ore things happening in Karratha. We're talking about autonomous 2008 to 2012.
Yep.
So we're talking about autonomous trains. There was lots of activity up there. My steel caps got a bit of red dirt on them. So that was an amazing opportunity in a big company. But kind of got to 2015 and was looking for a bit of a change, and I moved over to the Chamber of Commerce, WA, and part of that move was around, I'd been in a big organisation. My next move, I wanted to kind of go out there and see what a whole lot of companies did and learn a little bit about what advocacy was like, but also, speak to the Woodsides, to the small lunch bar cafe owner and understand what owning a business was like and what some of their challenges was and what they really needed help with. So I did that for 5 years and loved it. And at that point in time was building a house myself. And for some silly reason thought that going through that process I knew everything there was about building a house, and I could transfer some of the skills that I had from CCIWA across the HIA and do lots of things within the building industry. And like maybe some of your listeners might know, I knew some stuff and certainly didn't know everything, but I've spent the last 5 years at HIA working with our members, and the last 12 months have been lucky enough to do it as the executive director, which has been a fantastic experience and something that I'm really humbled to do, to represent our membership.
Yep.
And something I'll never stop enjoying and working for and really enjoying at the moment.
Well done. Congrats, man. You can tell you're very passionate about this role. We've been chatting for probably 15, 20 minutes before we press record as well. You could just see that there's definitely a fire in your belly for this.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And, despite the varied career before getting here, it was always around people and their stories and kind of helping them grow. And I love coaching footy as well. And part of that's around bringing the best out of people. And, we have some amazing big builders who do things fantastically well, but we have some amazing small builders as well. And sometimes they just need a little bit of help to kind of take them to the next level. And watching them grow and watching them kind of understand what it takes to be a really successful builder is something that I'm passionate about, and a home is something that's important to everyone.
Absolutely.
So I think ultimately finding ways to get a roof over more people's head is kind of what we really need to be trying to do.
What is the secret to being a really successful builder?
Well, we were touching on it before. Ultimately, it's customer experience. There's the technical part of building that our builders do really well, and whether they've been a bricklayer or a carpenter or had some other experience within the building industry, by the time they become a builder, they've got a really, I guess, strong understanding of the core components of what it takes to build a house. But from the customer's perspective, it's that engagement, and it's how you engage with that customer through that experience and bring them along on the journey that ultimately takes it from being a great house to a great home, in my opinion. And going through that process myself on the other side, I think has been absolutely helped me kind of take some of our builders on that journey and get them thinking about that as well, and how important it is to keep your customer involved as part of the process.
Yeah. And I'm just thinking back to your journey there as well, when you said you were going out to the woodsides to the small businesses as well and asking them what struggles they've had. Like, you've definitely took some skill sets from there into this role, and as a business owner, that we need to know what the customer wants.
Absolutely.
If we just deliver what we want, we're going to have a very small customer base, aren't we?
Absolutely, yeah. And part of it's educating the customer as well. The Google's amazing these days, and we all learn through reviews. And the customer that you are dealing with now as a builder is a very different customer that you were dealing with 10 or 15 years ago. They've got so much more experience and smarter and educated, and only have to type in the right thing or the wrong thing to get some information. So, we've, even from a HIA perspective, our lens is changing at the moment, and we're trying to work out what role we play as an industry body to kind of have a consumer lens that says, this is what the building process looks like, and this is what good process is, and this is how you should be engaging with your builder, and trying to bring everyone along on that journey, so that I guess we're trying to give people the most up-to-date information.
Yeah. And like we said there just a couple of minutes ago, we've been through the most challenging 24-month the world has ever seen, not just the construction industry, like it just the chaos that we went through, and everybody had certain ideas to try and stimulate things and no idea what was going to happen because we've never really been through it before. Right or wrong, we've ended up in the position that we're in, and the building industry has been through the ringer, really, hasn't it?
Yeah, it has. Yeah. And you're right. We 100% stand by the decisions that were made through that COVID period. And, I think hindsight is 20/20. But like you said, there's some amazing industry stalwarts that I've spoken to over the course of the last 3 years that have never seen it as challenging as we are at the moment. And it's interesting, it's almost a forgotten memory for some that COVID was here and kind of what impact that it had. But 3 years later, we're still really kind of fighting through some of the effects on it. And there's lots of us that are caught up in that at the moment. Yeah.
So just so the people that are listening to the podcast can understand the sort of the impact that these decisions made, how many houses were we building pre-COVID? So when did it start? 2019?
I think March 2020 was kind of when it kind of got heavy. Started June 2020 was when the stimulus announcements were made, and the state and federal ones were made within a couple of days of each other. To give you some context, probably in around 2015, 2016, we were building around that 32,000 homes, which was peak, which was huge. That's a lot. Which was huge.
Yeah. What sort of issues were we coming up against them when we were building that?
I think we still saw some of the length of time issues that we're experiencing now.
Yep.
But I think what happened in that period is we saw a bit of a gradual incline. So it wasn't going from the bottom to the top like we've seen over the last 3 years. It was a steady increase from 2012. To give your listeners some idea, HIA kind of really stands by that 18 to 20,000 homes a year mark is where industry kind of needs to be at to have a really good industry supplying the right amount of homes into WA. And it keeps our workforce really sustained. So we kind of got right up there, and that was peak construction time for the mining boom, and everything was...
Skills shortages.
Material
shortages.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Cost increases?
Probably not to the extent that we saw, but there definitely would have been an increase. I think I saw some stats not long ago, but over the last 25 years, the price increases, it's only gone down 4 times. So there would have been price increases that we would have seen through that period of time. But I guess coming off that 2016 timeframes down to 2020, just before the pandemic, we got down to as low as 10,000 detached homes. Wow. Which is obviously well below, and it's critical market failure, and we lose material suppliers out of WA who think, well, there's not enough activity going on there, we're just going to stay on the East Coast. We lose our trades who are, obviously not having enough work to keep them sustained in full-time employment, and they look at other options, whether that be going interstate or maybe up north or something like that. So, we got down to that 10,000 homes, and I guess that's where some of the around that decision making was that we can't let it get any lower. So, we need to at a minimum keep it kind of heading in the right direction, like we were starting to see at 2020.
Yep.
And we went from 10,000 to about 24,000 new starts overnight. And I think the other key factor was that you had to have your slab down within 6 months to get the stimulus. So, it meant that a lot of builders were changing their building models to get that slab to site, so the customer would get their money, and then it was like, okay, we'll worry about the building later. And I guess ultimately what's happened is we call it the wombat in the snake. You've got this big clump of work now that's kind of worked its way through. Everyone's kind of well aware of the bricklayer shortages, and it's at carpentry and probably roof on. We're heading towards that plaster stage like we're talking, and then you hit tiling, cabinet making, fixings, and hopefully it'll be kind of out the back end by kind of the end of this year. Yeah,
we've definitely seen our renovation trades. They're starting to feel the pressure now, just getting materials. Like our carpenter team, they've just went out and bought as many door frames as they can get hold of and store them in the garage. So yeah, it's definitely getting to that end now, and we're feeling it. And for so long, whilst it was bricklayers and roof carpenters and stuff, our renovation team was just chugging along nicely, no problems whatsoever. But we're feeling it now. Yeah,
absolutely. And the bricklayers are back to kind of more of those normal levels. So,
because the prices are dropping back down as well, aren't they?
Yeah, they're kind of back down to. They've come back down as well.
Yeah. So we went from 32,000 houses. And then the stimulus that brought all that in was the construction boom that was going on up north, wasn't it? We had the Gorgon project going on, we had the Wheatstone project going on, 3 huge projects. It was along with Impex as well. So we had almost 30,000 people in the state just to fill them job vacancies.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And, coming from Rio, they had plenty of activity happening in that time with Kadaidri and a few of those other ones. So, yeah, it was a hive of activity, and, you hear about some of those numbers being talked about now as kind of whether it's the rare earths or whether it's the resources industry. They're talking about 30 or 40,000 people being needed over the course of the next 3 to 5 years. It's going to be an interesting ride,
isn't it? Just we went from 32 down to 10, and then we went from 10 to 24 basically overnight when all the stimulus came out, all the grants came out, and the federal one was 20k, 25, and the WA home builder grant was 20.
Yeah,
so 45 grand towards a house, but that also drove prices up as well.
Yeah, so I think that. Yeah, I think whether that drove prices up or whether some builders who had been in the game for a while could see kind of what was going to happen over a period of time and adjusted accordingly. I think they ultimately knew that when this a lot of work was going to come in, there was going to be some increased labour and material costs, and a lot of our builders use fixed price contracts as part of their contractual arrangements with their customers, and there's not a lot of flexibility in some of those. So, they had to be making those decisions up front.
So some builders will have been making a loss on some of these contracts that they signed. So if they signed it at $250,000 for a 4x2, 200 square metres, for instance, by the time that build was finished, with all the delays that's been in, let's say 18 or 24 months later, that $250,000 contract could have cost a builder $320,000 to $350,000, couldn't it?
Yeah, I think it was about 40% at the moment. So I think your 250 is probably around the 380 mark.
Yeah, phenomenal, isn't it?
Yeah. So it's it's been a really hard time, and I think, you know, a hard time for everyone.
Hard time for everyone, because the people that are building the houses just want to get into these houses.
Yeah.
Obviously, a lot of these people are homeowners that want to move into a nice, new, shiny house, and rightly so as well. They've worked hard and saved up and got themselves into a position where they can do that.
Yeah.
And all a builder wants to do is build houses and finish houses. It's not like the builder's going slow on purpose. There's a lot of things that are slowing them down at the minute, isn't there?
No, the builders certainly don't make money if they're building houses really slowly. So, it's definitely they're trying to work as fast as they can, and it's in their best interests to, get those houses finished. Absolutely. Customers, they've been waiting a long time. They're probably paying, more in rent than they'd probably budgeted at that period of time. So, it's been challenging for everyone involved for the last couple of years.
Is the light at the end of the tunnel yet? Are we safe to say it's normalising?
I think it's normalising, yeah. I think, like we talked about, I think that wombat's getting to the end of the snake, and I'd like to think that probably the other thing is that everyone has a different experience when they're building, so it can depend on who you're building with, what location you're building, what type of material you're building with. So there's lots of different factors that go into kind of the speed of construction, the types of relationships maybe that the builder has with certain trades, and who they can call favours into, and maybe who they can't. So, there would be some people over the course of the last 2 years that have had a pretty good experience and have got through reasonably quickly, and then there's certainly others that it's taken a long time, and they may still have 12 months left in that journey. So I think there's light in the tunnel, and most of the people that I've spoken to coming back in 2023 could see a light at the end of the tunnel. It might have been a flicker for some, but there was definitely a light, and we are starting to see some of those things normalise. So, I think if you're putting a slab down now with kind of most of our builders, you're probably looking at about 12 months' time to get into that house.
Great. Now, off the back of this, obviously, sometimes these problems that are created also cause us to think differently as well. For so long in Western Australia, we've been building everything in double brick, haven't we? Which isn't a bad thing, because they're solid houses, aren't they? But what we are seeing now, when I had Jay Walter on the podcast, he said that there's been a big change in the way people are thinking about construction methodology, materials, not just double brick anymore. There's a lot of timber, steel frame, hemp. There's all sorts out there at the minute. Like, what's your views on the materials that we're using at the minute?
Yeah, listen, I think it's funny that it's taken a pandemic to make WA kind of change its construction methods. So, I was out on site today, and there was certainly more framed and brick veneer construction than I've seen for a long time, and out towards kind of that Brabham Vale kind of area. So it was really interesting to kind of go through and look through some of those homes. Obviously, certainly, I think WA is predominantly double brick, as you say, but we are certainly starting to see some of those things come out. There's some amazing precast types of facilities that are being developed. We're seeing lots of modular construction that's occurring, that's helping support some of the social housing programs. I was down in Albany a few months ago as well, and there's some amazing off-site construction that's happening down there as well, yes, where they're building 2 and 3 and 4 facilities all in the same spot out the back of an eco-village or something like that, and then just kind of shipping them into space, and away they go. So it's pretty cool. Like, it's from a productivity point of view, it certainly lends itself to being more productive. But, we still get plenty of people that walk through a display home and do the knock test on the wall just to make sure it's double brick. So I think we're on the way to people trialling different methods. Yeah. And I think if COVID's taught us anything is kind of having probably more options rather than just kind of one or two should some things change in the supply chain or within the labour pool that mean, you get caught up in the pool with everyone else. Yeah.
What are we seeing now in the way of build contracts being signed? Because we've obviously had that spike and then the slow decline back down. Are people signing up to build now, or is it still fear from the media?
Yeah, I think there's consumer confidence is certainly taken a hit over the course of the last 12 months, and part of that is absolutely kind of the cost and the length of time that people have heard and seen, whether it's the media or friends or whoever it is going through that experience, and it's
Uncle John at the barbecue.
Uncle John at the barbecue, and then you throw rate rise or rate 12.
Yeah.
Is that 11 rate rises in a row?
Spoke about them, yeah.
Yeah, and you know, I kind of talk about costs, length of time to build, and kind of interest rates as being the three things that have really impacted consumer confidence over the course of the last 12 months. So we have seen new home sales come off, understandably. But I think as we kind of get back to, as I said, a time where costs are probably a little bit more predictable than we've seen over the course of the last 2 or 3 years, timeframes are getting back to more of those 12-month periods, and I'm touching your wooden desk here to kind of say that interest rates aren't going to go too much further up, that people are dipping their toes back into the markets. And kind of what we've seen at the start of this year is people getting back into the home building market, whether that is probably part of that is consumer confidence coming back a little bit, but also we've got such a tight rental market that it's kind of making people having to look at building as an option.
Do you know what the split is between homeowners and investors that are building at the minute?
I don't actually, no. We've definitely seen an increase in investors come into the market over the course of the last 6 months in particular, and particularly on the East Coast. I think when they could see our market as still the most affordable market in Australia, and they can almost get 2 for 1 kind of in what they would invest in on the East Coast. I think, we've certainly seen an increase. That said, there's a couple of, we'd love to see some more. We'd love to see some international investment, but there's some restrictions on that. So we've been talking a lot with the state government about how do you kind of take things like the foreign buyers surcharge away to attract some more international investment into Western Australia.
That was another interesting decision that was made, wasn't it, by the government?
It was, yeah. And, that was kind of back in 2018, 2019, I think, and they came into power, and the Western Australian government has been very parochial about the West Australian people, which has obviously served it pretty well, but it's obviously affected other bits and pieces of the home building landscape as well.
Yeah. We can look at some of these decisions and think that we're weird, but at the end of the day, it's a great place to live, it's a great place to be. I don't know if people heard in the background there, my wife just brought the kid in, little Freddie. He's crying literally right outside the door. I just can't wait for him to see more of this country, because it's just an incredible place to be, isn't it?
Absolutely, yeah. And I think that's why we'll always get people coming here. And, that's going to fuel a bit of home growth as well at the moment. I think the immigration numbers came out a couple of weeks ago, and they were really positive for the last quarter of last year. I think people are going to see WA and Australia as a safe place to live and a great place to bring up children.
Yes.
So I think we are going to see more people come.
Well, let's talk about immigration, because right now, and you touched on it there, the rental market's extremely tight, but also the market to purchase established properties is extremely tight as well. I think we've got 7,800 roughly properties for sale, and that's a mix of house, land and units. And then in the rental market, I believe we're down to about 1,600 to 1,700 houses and units altogether. So less than 10,000 opportunities for people to purchase or rent right now. But we've got the migration tap back on, haven't we? Have you got any stats on what we're bringing into the state in the way of skilled migration?
I don't on me, but I
put you on the spot.
But I certainly know it was a really encouraging number, and we're kind of getting back to what we saw pre-COVID levels as far as numbers of people coming in. Obviously, probably that first flow on nationally was around students coming back into the universities, and now we're starting to see kind of the flow-on effects of those people who were. Sounds a bit crude, but probably racked and stacked through the COVID period to come into WA are kind of in the position to come in. You touched on it really well, that it's that the chicken and the egg is we want more people to come in, but where are we going to house them?
Yeah. Who do we bring first?
Tradies, obviously, to kind of help us to build the houses.
Yeah.
But it's certainly going to be the difficult conversations that we have to have. How do we rent more rooms, have more spaces that people live in? How do we look at things like stamp duty for those empty nesters to kind of help them move into different types of accommodation? I think
very stagnant, the market at the minute.
It is, yeah. But it's also the costs are making it really challenging to build apartment complexes, and some of the medium density product that we kind of need to kind of get people moving and have those clusters. They're just not quite stacking up at the moment. So, it's a really interesting time in that space, and I think we need to get a little bit creative and have that conversation of how do we facilitate some of those people coming in, whether that's for a short period of time or whether that's something transitional that we look at here in WA.
Yeah. Like you mentioned earlier as well, the sort of wombat and the snake right now, it's at the fixing trade, so we need tilers, plasterers, painters, floor layers, tilers. Did I say tilers? Said them twice, that's how many
That's how many we need, yeah, absolutely.
Any sort of rough idea what we need in the way of trades to come in to kind of help us with this bottleneck in the industry that we're seeing at the minute?
Yeah, I think unlimited number would be fantastic, but I think we've got to just be careful about how we bring them in, and we need that balance between skilled migration and training and the existing workforce to make sure that we don't flood the market with trades to kind of get us through this period of time. And like I talk about, the kind of new home market has been soft for 12 months. So we've just got to get that balance right to bring those people in. We're kind of talking in the hundreds maybe in some of those trades as a way of, testing what that market's like. It won't put hopefully too much strain on the current housing market and finding those people accommodation. But, if we started with 1,000 trades, then that'd be fantastic for us to kind of get through some of that work.
Yeah. What about apprentices? Because I don't want to tie them all with the same brush, but the younger generation that come through now don't seem to be as interested as what I was when I was growing up. But then again, I was brought up by a tradie. My stepdad was a plumber. I was an electrician, still am.
Yeah.
So I was always brought up around that. But then the feedback that I'm getting from my stepfather now is that the kids just don't want to be involved in this anymore. They all want to be YouTubers and social media sensations. But also computers and screens play a big part in their lives. So they're learning code quite early in school and stuff like that as well. Are we seeing many apprentices coming through the system now and many people leaving school and getting apprenticeships?
Yeah, it's an interesting landscape, and it's certainly different from what it was 20 years ago. As someone with a 10-year-old daughter who loves her screen time, there's certainly that element coming through. I think people are generally staying in school longer. It's fair to say that more kids are kind of staying through to the end of Year 12. But we have seen a change, and I think the numbers that we saw recently are about 50-50 in Western Australia as to the kids that are going to university following versus the kids that are following other pathways. And I think a lot of those are heading into the vet pathway and to becoming trades. So we saw through that COVID period, the government brought in some relief for businesses to take on trades, up to 50% of the wages, and our apprentice numbers doubled within the building and construction market. So, it was all of a sudden attractive to become a brickie when they were kind of making reasonable rates and you could make a living out of it. So I think we can do, as an industry, a better job at, putting our arms around some of the people that are coming into the industry and understanding that times have changed a little bit, and we need to change the way that we bring those people in, and making an environment somewhere that they want to flourish. But they're very creative as well, and I think that's something that we can really harness. And they want to make things, which is what we do. They're very tactile. They want to see a creation, maybe sometimes a little bit faster than we'd like. But I think for them to be able to put their name against something and say, I made that and I made it to a really good standard of quality, I still believe that exists within that apprentice pool coming through. It's just about how do we harness that and we probably just nurture it and we just probably need to tweak some of the things that we do to accommodate that a little bit more.
They are literally the future of the house building industry, aren't they?
I think so, and that's kind of, you talked about gaming before, but some of the customer experience now, where we see virtual reality, if people are able to walk through their new home, that's part of that experience. Yep. So it may not be kind of setting a brick, but we talked about some of the precast and the fabrication. Some of the technology that goes into those is amazing now, and that's how they're coming through. So there's plenty of ways that people can be a part of our industry. And it's just about finding that right spot for each of those people and embracing some of that innovation that's coming through.
Yeah, fantastic. Let's talk about the new medium density housing code. Yeah. So it was initially brought out, from my understanding, to help increase density. Obviously, medium density housing codes, anything from R30 to R80.
That's correct.
Is covered under this code, which looks good from the outset, but it's thrown up some challenges at the same time, hasn't it?
It has, yeah. I think, first of all, I will say that it's probably gold standard as far as industry engagement comes about. I think Departments of Planning, Lands and Heritage did a fantastic job at getting everyone around the table and having some really strong debates over the course of a couple of years to kind of get a sense of how can we improve our density and housing stock and look at some of the issues that we were facing. I think, if any of us, hand on heart, really want to see big wads of 300 square metre blocks with 250 square metre houses on them, I don't think, I think maybe there's better ways that we can do it. That said, it's certainly thrown out some challenges, and I think as we kind of play around with those ideas heading into October this year, when it starts to be implemented, and then September 2025 for some of that greenfield activity, it is going to force us to look at two-storey living in some of those R30 blocks that you were talking about before. It will cause us just to look at kind of what those options are. It will mean probably that some of our land developers look at different ways of zoning some of their land. I think the R30 product and the R25 product is really similar to maybe having, we spent a lot of time advocating that maybe R30 should stay in the low density codes. Probably would have been a better result, but that was the decision that the government made, and we're now kind of working through what some of those challenges are. I think the fantastic thing is that we had them out at some of our committee meetings last week, so they're engaging with industry as we kind of continue to test what this means for our product, and hopefully we can continue to kind of change and adapt as we need to when some of these issues flare up. But
what are some of the high-level sort of obstacles or hurdles that developers are having to come across now with the new medium-density code?
Yeah, I think, some of the site cover definitions has certainly created some challenges. I think when you combine the medium-density code with some of the changes that are coming with the National Construction Code in 2025, and we look at the orientation of a block and what that may mean in regards to positioning of open space, it's going to be a lot more involved, and it'll probably mean that some blocks, from a land developer's point of view, are priced differently depending on where they are as part of the subdivision. So it will have a little bit of an effect on affordability. And like I said, when you're looking at that probably traditional 4x2 house that we have in some of those subdivision areas, some of those are going to have to consider, well, do we just go with a 3x2 or do we look to kind of move into a two-storey living? Does it affect the garage space? Probably affect some of the block widths that we've traditionally had in the past, and make some of those really challenging to be able to deliver. So I think I think everyone's kind of working through what that means at the moment. So
there'll be a lot more due diligence on the part of the developer. And the biggest challenge I can see is if everything's going to be double story to make these things work, then that's going to really impact the feasibility of a project, because when you go up, it obviously costs more money and takes a little bit longer to construct as well. But just because you've got a double-storey house doesn't necessarily mean it's worth more money at the same time, does it? So
no. We certainly ran into some of those valuation issues, whether we see more R25 product as a result. Yep. There's a few things that people are working through at the moment, and those people are much smarter than me to come up with those solutions. But it will, I think it does have an impact on affordability.
What about trees?
We love trees. Listen, I think, I love the trees that are around my place. So, like I said at the start, the housing developments that are all packed on top of each other. I think we can all recognise
definitely needs some more tree canopy.
Needs some more tree canopy. I think what people don't realise is that a lot of those land developments are also designed to the contours of the surrounding area as well. So, how do we make better use of the combined open space, and what kind of elements are running through a development? Obviously, the medium density code is pushing to have an area where a significant tree can be planted as part of the development. So that's going to force some of those things to happen. So I think we need to kind of face some of those challenges, whether that's prescribed through some of these regs or not. I think that's some of the debate that's happened over the course of the last couple of years.
Yeah, there've been a few shires that have implemented their deep soil retention zone and tree canopy cover either way. Even before the density code was released, we had a design that we had to totally restructure because we couldn't make it work with what they wanted.
Yeah,
but like we said earlier, we are on the planet to solve problems, aren't we?
That's right.
Solutions.
Absolutely. And I think there's some concessions that are in there as well, in regards to keeping some of the existing trees.
Yeah.
To help with some of that. So I think the department where they've been able to kind of help the builders and the developers kind of maximise what they're providing to the customer and some benefits. They've tried to do that as much as they can.
A good tree done right. Looks incredible as well, doesn't it?
Absolutely, yeah. It's so much. It's not just the tree. I'm sure we climbed through trees in our backyards when we were growing up, and some of our greatest memories are hiding from my brothers in trees, throwing water balloons at them, and they could never find where you were. So, stringing a fake tennis net up to play some tennis in the backyard between two trees. So, I think they're so critical to having a good experience in our homes that finding that balance is tricky, but it's really important that we have that discussion.
Cubby house as well.
Absolutely, cubby house. Yeah, how could I forget?
Yeah.
Jumping over the neighbour's back fence and stuff like that. We can't do that anymore, but yeah, no, I think it's certainly important.
Yeah, Michael, what's happening in the HIA over the next 12 months? What's exciting you at the minute?
Yeah, I think our housing awards are open at the moment, and it's one of my favourite events of the year, both from a housing point of view and an apprentice point of view. So we kind of run an apprentice awards where we look at the different apprentices across the WA region, and we had a fantastic guy from Geraldton win last year. We're looking to see more diversity come through this year with starting to see some more females in trades. We've got some fantastic Indigenous talent that's joined our industry. So watching that group come through and get nervous on stage when they accept their awards is certainly one of my highlights of the night. But certainly looking forward to seeing the great product that we continue to build in WA now that we're starting to finish some of them come through in some of our awards. There's lots of activity in regards to some of our work that we're doing with the young people in our industry as well. So over the last 12 months, we've launched a concept called Built Different that looks to support that demographic that's kind of 25 to 35 in our industry that are often working alone. They might be a planner within a small organisation. They might be working in a small team on site. How can we continue to provide that group with an opportunity to network and learn and come together and have a few beers and just generally kind of understand what the industry is and who they can reach out to. So that's a really great initiative that we're kind of looking to, how do those apprentices that are coming to the end of their apprenticeship, how do you give them the skills to become a business when they're going to become a business in 12 months' time? So running little short courses for them, wellness courses, mental health's a big thing for us at the moment. Yep. So like we've talked about, it's been a really challenging year, no matter where you are in the industry in the last sort of 3 to 4 years. So there's lots of tools out there at the moment that people can utilise, but Mates in Construction is a fantastic one that is largely funded through our construction training fund and can get out there and provides free support to anyone in the industry to either have that conversation or stronger support as they need it through their mental health journey. So that's something that we've really embraced and will continue to push. national construction codes coming in a couple. We were lucky enough, but we were able to kind of have a really long transition period for that. But it's the biggest change in our building and construction methods that we've had since the introduction of the BCA. So, there's a lot of work for us to skill up our members and get them understanding what it means to build a 7-star home, to work with some of our industry suppliers as to kind of what they're going to need to do to make that happen. Probably a consumer education part of that as well, to understand where you can have a window and where you can't have a window, and if you want to have a south-facing window, what that might mean. And what else?
Yeah, lots going on.
Yeah, so there's plenty going on, and I guess ultimately we're just throwing our arms around our builders and trades and the industry over the course, keeping them up.
Guys, nearly there.
That flicker, getting that flicker to be a burning bonfire by the end of the year, and
hope. Push, boys. Come on.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So that's just keeping the momentum up and spirits, and trying to get around and see everyone and kind of make sure we're getting that information so that we can feed it back to government and let them know what we've been up to, and let them know what we need or don't need. Like we've talked about, we've got medium density. There's some more stuff happening in work health and safety. We've got the National Construction Code. So there's lots of things happening in industry, and we just need to kind of get some of this work done at the moment. Absolutely. But we love it. And like I said, at the core of every builder in WA, they just love building homes for people. And, I think if we can kind of remember that everyone's kind of working as hard as we can to get those people in their homes, we can get through the next 12 months and then hopefully get back to whatever the new normal is post-COVID and have a good time doing it.
Michael McGowan, it's been an absolute pleasure catching up with you today, mate.
You too, Neil. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much.
No worries. Cheers.
Thanks for listening. Make sure you tune in the same time next week so you stay up to date with all the cash flow positive property updates.